Hello and welcome to the Art of Transitions. My name is Gwen Mazza and I'm your host. Our guest today is Reverend Susan Shafer, and she is the pastor at Asbury United Methodist Church here in Rochester. She is joining us today for a great conversation, and the conversation is going to be around sacred journeys. Please stay tuned and we'll be right back. Again, my name is Gwen Mazza. Our guest today is Reverend Susan Shafer. Thank you for coming.
You are most welcome.
Thank you. I asked Susan to come be with us today because there's a very tender and a very soft conversation that I'd like to have today and be able to open it up to our community. And it's around sacred journeys. And by sacred journeys, Susan and I will be talking about what it's like to transition folks to the other side, assist them, assist the families and the members and the friends who are here still, and just talk about some of the process and how it's really changed over the years. So thank you again for coming. Would you tell our audience a little bit about your background, how you got into the ministry, and how you got into the work of helping others transition to the other side?
Years ago, I felt called to the ministry, and there weren't opportunities for women to be in ministry, in worship leadership, and in pastoral care. So I waited, and God's calling for me came back as our children began to transition themselves from home to school. And I went back to seminary and was called to Asbury First United Methodist Church, placed there by the bishop and the congregation. And it's been an incredible opportunity for ministry, for growth for me, and the opportunity to help persons move from this life to the next.
And so you have been actively a pastor for how long now?
30 years.
For roughly 30 years. And so you waited for the time when it was time for you to say, it's my turn to give to the folks in the way that's about transition. When we talk about sacred transition, and you and I talked sacred journeys, we talked about this being the title for the show today. Can you share with our audience some of the pieces that went through your mind and heart as we were getting ready to entitle the show?
My life has been deeply touched when I sit with families and particular persons who are dying. Sometimes it's difficult for us to use the word death and dying, but I have felt called to help families make that transition. And in seminary, I did field education, and I was with a pastor who had been in ministry for 35 years. And he said to me one time, "Oh, don't ever be at the bedside of anybody who's dying. It's not good." And that statement went against what I felt in my heart and what I believed both scripturally and in experience, that we could create the beauty of that movement. So my first opportunity, I was called to a home, and the family was surrounding this beautiful woman. And as she made her transition, and we began to talk about the memories that they always wanted to keep in their heart around this mother, she beautifully stopped breathing, and I believe that the breath of God began to breathe for her. And not everyone calls it God. Some people call it moving to another spiritual dimension or into a universal love. There's many ways of explaining it. But as a family surrounds a loved one, that movement can be gentle and beautiful. And it's something we all fear, wondering how we will die. As I've worked with families and had the privilege being invited to be at the bedside, wherever that might be, I have found this to be beautiful, transforming for the person, and can be transforming for the family.
I'm aware that as I experienced my first true loss was when I was 13 and my mom had died. And what I'm very aware of is that there were certain ways that I felt like I was supposed to conduct myself.
Right.
There were these rituals that I was told, you're supposed to behave like this when someone dies. And I have to tell you, quite honestly, I struggled even then, because even though I was incredibly in shock and in grief and loss that my mother had died, I was also, she had died in an accident, so there was not even any preparation for it. I was very aware that this was also a time when there was a lot of laughter and joy, and that seems like was not supposed to happen, and yet it was. And as I've transitioned with a lot of other folks in my life, like grandparents and those folks, there was always this sense of love and joy around the events. And I don't know if folks always feel like they have permission to experience that. And I mean some real laughter
Absolutely.
and great stories around that time of transition for family members. And that's part of what I was hoping that we could share with the audience, that yes, Kubler-Ross did a great job in her work of defining the 5 stages of grief, and they're all very true, from the shock, denial, and bargaining, anger, and then acceptance kind of pieces. And she also opened the door for us to have conversations about death and dying very differently.
Right.
And I think she didn't come into business until, in terms of the death and dying business, until about 30 years ago, truthfully. Mm-hmm. So we really have had different experiences. So would you share with us a little bit about more of the joy that you see around the transition period, as well as balancing it with that sadness?
I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
First, I think we have to realize that we can hold more than one feeling at the same time. And that's particularly important for us at the time of death. Just this week, so I'll use a very recent experience, there has been a vigil for a week and a half around a woman who was making that transition from this life to the next. The family has anticipated any moment that she was going to die. And they've loved her and touched her, and they've shed tears. The day she actually did die, which was a week and a half later than when we thought originally, which is so typical of death, it has its own time, perhaps God's time. But this particular day, the family had gone downstairs to get some ice cream. And it was in one of the local residences where they can get ice cream. And while they were down getting the ice cream, there was a violinist who happened to be there. And the violinist began to play "You Are My Sunshine." They got their ice cream, recognizing, isn't this strange? That's our mother's favorite song. They came back upstairs on the floor where she was, and suddenly the nurse was humming "You Are My Sunshine." And what's going on here? This is really strange. So they asked the nurse if she had heard the violinist. She said no, but the woman down the hall is humming "You Are My Sunshine." They went into the room with their mother with these dishes of ice cream. And the mother loved ice cream. So they're there, grandchildren, children, and her husband, and they're laughing over "You Are My Sunshine," and they're eating ice cream. And suddenly, there was the transition, and quietly and beautifully, she had taken her last breath in the midst of this loving family surrounding her, laughing and caring about this song that had been so special to her. Was it sad? It is sad to lose a loved one, but hopefully it's not a loss forever. We recognize that that life was given to us, and the spiritual world didn't lose that life. So giving it back, we don't lose it either. Life is eternal, and love is immortal, and death is only a horizon, and a horizon is nothing save the limit of our sight. Mm-hmm. So to be there with another is to help them. Death is something that most of us have some fear around. We wonder how we'll die. We wonder, hopefully, that we'll be surrounded by loved ones. Most of us want someone there, and we don't want to be alone when we make that transition. So to help families be about their loved one. I've even seen families in tremendous laughter, telling the stories, the funny stories about their loved one. And suddenly, a part of that love, that movement happens.
Right.
I've also been there when the last tear comes out of the eye of the one who's dying, and very tenderly a family takes a linen cloth and blots that tear, and they have that last tear. We know that at death sometimes our eyes water, and those are usually not tears of sadness of the person. They're tears that represent what happens in our body as it's beginning to stop its miraculous movement in life.
Thank you. I'm hoping that that piece offers our community some more ideas about the different emotions and the range of emotions. And this isn't a right and a wrong process.
It's not.
And a lot of times folks will walk away and say, oh, I ought not have been like that. And really, it's about being honest and authentic and experiencing the moment for what it is. I actually had the honor of being with one of my best friends as she transitioned across and, singing beautiful hymns and just being with her. And she really did not want to move across alone.
Right.
And it was very clear. And I can remember initially I was really not sure what I was doing. It was not in my repertoire, although I had been with folks who were going through the dying process again and again and again through my work. And I must say that it was such an honor. It was totally my honor and grace to be with this person who I have called and still call my friend. And
it's a sacred trust and privilege.
And it really is. Yeah. Those are beautiful words to put with that. Here's the other piece to that. And I think, sometimes we struggle. We have this belief that if we don't mourn painfully, that somehow we aren't doing it right. Or if we don't, do all this incredible sadness. And I love my friends and I love the folks who transition. Once they've moved across, oftentimes I'm at this place in my life that I don't feel like I've lost them at all. And we talked about my recent friend who died a few months ago, and I just know where he is, and I feel so much at peace. I know where Marlene is. In fact, it's very easy to hear them letting me know what I need to be doing, or still having great conversation too. And a lot of folks won't admit to that, and I don't mind because it's true. It simply is. What has your experience been, and how have you combated some of the old traditions and rituals or rules that we were supposed to conduct and do or not do?
You mentioned Kubler-Ross a few minutes ago, and she really expanded our boundaries of understanding about preparation for death as well as grief. Her work is beautiful. What we did wasn't quite so beautiful because we took her stages and made them on a line. You went from anger and bargaining, and eventually you come to a peacefulness. That wasn't the way she really wanted it, but somehow we try to put a mindset onto some of these things. So people think, oh, I'm in this stage, so now I'm going to move to this stage, and then I'll move to that stage. And it's not that way at all. All those stages sometimes are happening at the very same time. So we have to help people understand that there's no right way. So first of all, I want to affirm people in whatever they're feeling. Sometimes death requires a great deal of time for grief to move in ourselves, and to limit it to a year or 2 years is not fair to the person that's going to experience it. Some people will say, it's been a year, Susan, and I still miss him or her so much. Of course. If we can get to a point, though, in our own transitioning, where we can allow that person to speak to us. And I have a wonderful personal story. Our son-in-law and daughter gave birth prematurely to twins. And one of the twins struggled with breathing at first. And when she came home from the hospital, one day she had been fed and taken care of and was laid down in her car seat so she'd be upright for an afternoon nap. And the nanny went in to do some laundry, and all of a sudden, as she's taking clothes out of the dryer, my mother's face, and my mother died before this little girl was born, my mother's face came to this nanny. And there was something in the face that said, go check on Claire. She left the dryer quickly, went into the family room where Claire was sleeping, and Claire had stopped breathing. To this day, the nanny will tell you that somehow my mother was connecting with her to go check on this child. My own mother sometimes sits on my shoulder, and the little things that she used to teach us, the little phrases will pop up. I will hear them or know that they're churning inside of me. And I hear other people say, last evening he was with me. Or I saw an image and I was free enough to be able to smile now that spirit is with me. So I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but I do believe that which we have given back to universal love or to God really does continue to move in our lives in just tremendous transformational ways.
I'm very aware that as some of the folks who are watching the show, they may not have had that experience,
right,
or be willing to entertain these thoughts. And I'm really okay with that in my life.
Me too.
I've really gotten to my space of, I understand that, and I can appreciate that. At the same time, I'm very aware, as you are, that there are events that happen, and they're simply information and conversations that I would have never been able to have or know that have helped propel my life in so many wonderful ways. And I also know that part of what happened for me is I actually got scared when I first started experiencing some of that. And I ran from it for a couple of years and denied that these kind of things were actually even happening. And then I finally had this wonderful mentor who came back into my life again. And she basically said, why are you continuing to run? And so when I stopped and I started to listen, there were so many gifts that I have gotten from those who have gone before me, as well as hopefully been able to make better contributions to the world in which we live because of what they've done. And in your case, there's this lovely little girl now, Claire, who's still with us because of the gifts that your mother so lovingly gave as well.
You know, sometimes I tell people, embrace what is. And for some people, they will never have the visitation of a spirit, and that means nothing about the value of their relationship. It just is a different way of experiencing death and movement. But there are others who will tell you that this happens for them. One is not spiritual and the other with spirit. It's just the way it is sometimes.
There's a couple of things that I'd like to share, because as you and I were chatting the other day, getting ready to do the show, one of the things that both of us realized is that we're both very connected to a certain book. We have, yes, and that I absolutely adore it. Now, the ironic thing the audience doesn't know is my intention was to bring this book today, and I couldn't get that to happen because of traffic jams and some blockages, so I couldn't get into my office. And on the way over, I was just very simply saying, I almost called you, but I didn't. I'm thinking, I'm hoping that she brought this book, and you did, which was an absolute delight for me, without me even asking, which was outstanding. Another gift, as I always see it. And I think it's important that you and I get an opportunity to share this book with folks because of the simplicity. I find it to be absolutely beautiful. And what other words would you use as you would describe it?
I think it's pictures and poetry offer us an idea about what it is to be in universal love, what it is to be in heaven. The poetry, I think, is beautiful. It talks about we can't take anything with us except, and it's a big except, the love of those who have loved us and the magic that we share. And then it concludes by saying, we shall be embraced by all the love of family and friends. And then the last moment of the book is so important to me. And we will be embraced by the light. Mm-hmm. And the light will be with us forevermore. And that light will shine forever in the next place that I go. Mm-hmm. Isn't it wonderful to look at it as light and carrying love, so that something doesn't end, it's a continuation. Mm-hmm. And one of the pictures that's beautiful in it, it says, I'll glide beyond the rainbows mm-hmm. without ever wondering why. And then it goes into, I won't be any body anymore. Right. I won't have take with me that I've broken the littlest law. Mm-hmm. I'll be perfect. Mm-hmm. And I will be as I was to be created mm-hmm. and live. Mm-hmm. So it's a tremendous book that I have used again and again in ministry. It was originally done as a children's book. Exactly. And if you go to buy, which I did last night, just... Mm-hmm. Did you? Yeah, and picked up a couple more because I was out of all the books. So there's something connected here that's... Yes. That is
clearly we're supposed to let this message out, making sure that they know the title of it is The Next Place by Warren Hansen. There we go. That's correct.
And yes. So it is in the children's section. I usually order about 30 of them at a time. I'm sure he must know me by name now because I order so many.
Yes.
But it's great for children. Mm-hmm. It is wonderful mm-hmm. for adults.
And here is that beautiful page that you talked about. I'll glide beyond the rainbows. I'll drift above the sky. I'll fly into the wonder without ever wondering why. And then I'm going to just pop back to another one of my favorite pages. All of them, I think, are my favorite pages. I will travel empty-handed. There is not a single thing I have collected in my lifetime that I would ever want to bring except the love of those who loved me and the warmth of those who cared, the happiness and memories and the magic that we shared.
All these good things will go with me. They will make my spirit glow. Mm-hmm. Imagine helping your loved one move from this life to the next, mm-hmm. knowing that the magic, the love, mm-hmm. the fun times that you have shared mm-hmm. don't end there. Mm-hmm. They go with that person. They've been a gift over a lifetime, mm-hmm. and now they are held somehow, mysteriously, mm-hmm. In the love of God. Mm-hmm. There's a piece that Gibran has done that is a bit like this book. Mm-hmm. It goes, I have passed a mountain peak, and my soul is soaring in the firmament of complete and unbound freedom. I can hear naught but the music of eternity. Mm-hmm. I am clothed in full whiteness. I am in comfort. I am in peace. I am one with God.
That is so powerful. What I would like to do, if this is acceptable to you, is I would love to have you come back again, because I'm very aware that this is one of probably 2 or 3 sessions and meetings and shows we ought to do on this, because I think there's also a need for special attention around those who transition from this place to the next place due to suicide and or really tragedy, and it doesn't always seem so gracious. And what the peace and the love as we speak about it may not always be so evident, and yet it's really there. So would you be willing to do that? Well, I would be very privileged to have you come again. So what I'd like to do is, on this note, I would really love to thank you very much, Reverend Susan Shafer, for coming to be with us. I would love to thank the viewing audience for spending a little time just in a great conversation as we've spent time together. If you have questions or information for Reverend Shafer, her contact information, you'll be able to get that off of the show today, as well as if you have ideas or thoughts about concepts you'd like to see presented on the show, feel free to contact me at the information as well that you see on the bottom of your monitor. And on that note, I want to thank you wholeheartedly for coming, and it's really been a grace.
Have a beautiful day.
You too, love.
Was produced through Penfield Community Television in Penfield, New York.